Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
We are live with another playoff edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming on the DFO YouTube and brought to you by Bet365, our sports betting partner for the 2024 playoffs. We'll be here with Bet365 to give you all the analysis, lines, and betting options for the postseason until just one team is left standing at the end. Frank Seravalli, both the East and Western Conference Finals are through one game, and I would say both have, to an extent, lived up to the hype.
Yeah, look, pretty much everything you could want from that Western Conference Final. Game one, a late tying goal, double OT, some fantastic chances, the best players in the world stepping up when it matters most. Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, it was a fun night last night in Dallas, Texas for game one of the Western Conference Finals. So let's start there, Frank. Connor McDavid saying after the game he probably wouldn't have slept very well if the Oilers didn't ultimately win that hockey game. And he was referencing his missed opportunity in the first overtime when Jake Ottinger absolutely robbed him with the paddle. He also probably could have been talking about his double minor to start overtime as well, which the Oilers were able to kill off. But it was the captain, Connor McDavid, coming through in double overtime, finding the back of the net. It was nice to see from an Oilers perspective, McDavid finally come through in the goal-scoring department, an area he's been kind of quiet in, very quiet in.
Look, I don't know if recharged is the right word, but it looked like those extra couple days between games really helped him. He certainly appeared to be more explosive to me. And it's not that he struggled at all in round two or in these playoffs. Anyone that hits 20 points in the first two rounds, no one's going to say that. It's just that he didn't look like he had the extra juice like himself. And I think it's also fair to say that he wasn't the Oilers' first or second best player through the first two rounds, which in an odd way of looking at things could actually be a huge positive for the Oilers moving forward. If he can reclaim that mantle in this round, that would certainly bode well for their chances to get back to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 2006. But I think at varying points in game one, it wasn't pretty for McDavid. It wasn't pretty for the Oilers, but they don't really ask how. They just ask how many.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I thought a couple of the areas that really carried them through that hockey game are areas where when you're relying on them, it's usually not a good thing. Stuart Skinner had one of his best games of the playoffs. I thought it was right up there with his performances against the LA Kings in round one, and their penalty kill was unreal. Granted, in overtime, they had to rely on a couple of goalposts during that 4-minute kill, but like you said, they don't ask how, they ask how many. The PK going 5 for 5, great. At the same time, being shorthanded 5 times, not ideal. Stuart Skinner stopping 31 of 33, great. You needed to see a sign of good goaltending from him. At the same time, giving up the amount of high-quality chances they did, also not great.
Yeah, I think coming away from that feeling some modicum of confidence for Stuart Skinner is important, but the penalty kill being 19 for its last 19 is something else. I don't know that that's something we necessarily had on our bingo card or saw coming. I can't imagine they're going to have the same success against the Dallas Stars that they did against the LA Kings in round one, or for chunks of time against a pretty powerless Canucks power play. Dallas certainly has a lot more weapons than that, and they're about to get healthier whenever Roope Hintz comes back, which will change the dynamic. But for the meantime, 19 for 19 runs like that are what help you win championships.
For the Oilers, it's their latest win in the Stanley Cup playoffs since 2006. Of course, the last time they made the conference finals, they were swept by the Colorado Avalanche. Quickly flipping this over to the Stars' perspective, Frank, if you repeat DeBoer, do you sit back as your head hits the pillow and go, man, one of those goalposts goes in and we're laughing, we're up 1-0, or are you sitting there going, boy, we gave Edmonton one when maybe Edmonton wasn't at their best?
I think you're probably sitting there going, I like our process. I like where our game was at. I like that we found a way to come back and tie the game when we're down with 3 minutes remaining. I like the number and quality of high danger chances that we got. And how often is Jake Ottinger going to have a goal like the second one that went in? I mean, probably not that often. He sort of got handcuffed on that play. And sometimes those things happen. So I think from a Stars perspective, you're like, we haven't won a game one to start these playoffs. No problem for us playing down. We're all good.
Yeah, that was a very common thing as I was going around Dallas yesterday talking to some Stars fans. They kind of shrugged and were like, we expected to lose this one. All the Stars do is lose the series openers. They've obviously lost both this one, and it's a trend that dates back a couple of seasons. We're going to keep talking about this series in a little bit with our pal Jon Goyens in a Friday edition of the Coaches Room, Frank. But let's go away from the playoffs for a little bit. The Vancouver Canucks had their closeout day, garbage bag day, locker room cleanout day, whatever you want to call it, and it was an interesting one. You had Filip Hronek kind of having a weird back and forth with the media. It was actually our guy Jeff Patterson, and Hronek didn't want to talk about health and all of that. One guy who was open to talking about his health was Elias Pettersson. He comes out, says he's been dealing with a knee problem. It's been bugging him since January, but he doesn't need surgery. Frank, I'm going to throw you a whole bunch of things that kind of confuse me about this, and you tell me if my confusion is maybe justified. You've been dealing with this since January. That's when the team went out and got Elias Lindholm. Okay, why didn't you just take a couple of weeks off and get better if the team got reinforcements down the middle? Also, it's not that bad that you don't need surgery, but yet it's been a problem that's been hindering your ability to play at the highest level for 4 months. Also, Rick Tocchet at different points in the playoffs came out to the media and said Pettersson has to move his feet better. Why would you come out and say that about a star player if you know he's dealing with a knee injury that's hurting his ability to move? Does any of that make sense to you? Am I maybe reaching at things here?
No, none of it makes sense to me, which is why I would almost guarantee you that the Vancouver Canucks were floored that Elias Pettersson said that yesterday. That was weak-minded. It was excuse-making. It was poor form. Go take a page from the book of some of your teammates. Ian Cole, who actually was legitimately injured in the second round, he was asked about his health, and he said, not talking about it. Not an issue. No excuses. Filip Hronek, point blank, for whatever reason, some people latched on to that clip as if he was being combative. His actual answer was, I wasn't hurt. I'm taking responsibility for my play. I'm telling you that it wasn't good enough. If I had answers for you, I would have solved them on the ice. And yet people seemed less satisfied by that, which was the pure honesty, and more swayed and certainly more sympathetic, at least what I saw on social media, to Elias Pettersson, who never took time off. The Canucks never got to a point where they thought it made sense to pull him out of the lineup, and then repeatedly said multiple times that he was healthy. I've been around the NHL for 15 plus years now. If someone is hurt, first off, the team doesn't let them take bullets. And second, they do everything they can to shield and cover their player. None of those things happened in this case, which leads me to believe that whatever Pettersson was dealing with is 1-800 excuses, and that he needed to be better. He needed something to hang his hat on that he could go back to himself at the end of the day and say, oh, you know what? This is on someone else. This is on my knee tendonitis.
Yesterday with Colby Cohn in the big segment, you talked about some players who have lost themselves a lot of money. How lucky is Elias Pettersson? He got that extension done before this playoff run.
Well, maybe that actually has something to do with why he played so poorly. I brought it up in one of my 4 burning questions for the Vancouver Canucks and the 4 teams eliminated in round 2. If you put a gun to a player's head like the Vancouver Canucks did and essentially said, we're trading you if you don't sign this, maybe the worst thing is just being you sign for $92 million and then you feel like, man, did these people not actually want me? Am I supposed to be here? Can I live up to this contract? Like, there's a lot mentally that comes with unpacking it. And I would say, to me, watching the production continue to slide from Lindholm this season, I was sitting there going, I wonder if there's a little bit of the John Klingberg effect, which was you had a pile of money sitting for you on the table for you to sign. You bypassed it because you thought you could get more, and then your play fell off a cliff, or at least your production did. And now all of a sudden you're left holding the bag wondering, oh my God, how come I didn't sign that contract? And now I'm going to lose $30+ million from one year to the next that I could have signed for. probably leaves you with a pretty sick feeling in your stomach that as a player makes you just want to press that much harder.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, at least you got $92 million though, is another response to that.
That would enable me to sleep pretty comfortably at night. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Frank, let's go into this next topic here, and we're getting a couple of reports here about Don Waddell's future in Carolina. And my initial question to you was going to be, with all these rumblings about him being allowed to talk to other teams and things like that, is this going to be smoke, fire, or a false alarm? I believe we're getting news as we're live on the show here that there's a team release that Don Waddell is stepping down as Hurricanes GM. Eric Tulsky is going to apparently be the replacement. Am I getting this correct?
You're getting it partially correct. So
Okay.
the Canes did just put out a press release saying, and I'm tweeting it right now, that Don Waddell has stepped down and Eric Tulsky takes over as the interim GM. But I believe that so they acknowledge in the press release that a full search has begun for a permanent general manager. I believe that search will include lots of external candidates. So I believe they've begun that process of trying to contact teams around the league. This is a parting of the ways that I think maybe the best way to describe it is, even though this team has had a ton of success, I don't think there's any animosity here. I think both Don Waddell and Tom Dundon, the owner, kind of arrived at this point and were like, hey, there's probably things on both ends of this that frustrate us. And, maybe it's best to just shake hands and move on. Don Waddell didn't have a contract for next season, was managing into the last year of his deal. That deal goes until June 30th. Obviously, they let him go 5 weeks early to pursue other potential opportunities, which could include Columbus, as he did interview with the Blue Jackets yesterday for their vacancy. But this was a situation that I think the Canes, sort of were like, okay, changes are coming, not just with our roster, but maybe also time to make some other changes too.
So Don Waddell leaving the Canes after 10 years in that position. He's 65 years old, but again, he said in his in the release that it's time for the next chapter in his career. You just said he interviewed with Columbus yesterday. So this isn't Don Waddell riding off into the sunset. This is a guy who is still fiery and still wants to continue running a hockey team. And I would imagine, Frank, Columbus amongst others. He's going to be a well sought after name.
Yeah, but right now there's only one apparent vacancy unless there's something else happening. And the other part too is, this is just speculation on my part, is that the rumors with Ken Holland leaving the Edmonton Oilers and linking him to Columbus, those certainly haven't died. The dot that I wanted to connect is Don Waddell and Ken Holland are pretty close. Wouldn't shock me at all to see those two guys team up at some point to work together, potentially in Columbus. That could make a lot of sense. And the other part of this equation is, what does all of this mean for Eric Tulsky? He is the interim GM, and he's going to be assisted by Darren York in the meantime, the other assistant GM. But will they make him the permanent GM? That means something. That's a really important question for the Carolina Hurricanes to answer, because my thought process would be, if not Eric Tulsky now, then when? And if that's not the case now, then are the Hurricanes prepared to lose him? I think that's a really important and fair question to ask.
If you want to hear one of the most fascinating hockey interviews, honestly, that I've ever heard, when you and Gregor sat down with him for the DFO rundown, Eric Tulsky, that is, and it was a number of years ago now. I think it was maybe 18 months ago. That was really good. His path through just his career outside of hockey, and then to link it all back to hockey, he is a fascinating individual. The Carolina Hurricanes summer also just got a lot more interesting.
It has, and that was a great pod. But there's also, I think I did another one separately with Eric Tulsky after the fact, that there's no shortage of interesting content around him.
Yeah. All right, Frank, we're going to get to Jon Goyens in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to pick up a conversation that, as I mentioned earlier, you and Colby had yesterday on the show about your top 75 unrestricted free agents for this summer. The full story, of course, is up at dailyfaceoff.com. And you talked about guys who had made themselves a lot of money throughout the season. There's another interesting kind of group of players, and I called them the bounce back boys, Frank, and it's guys who careers were in very interesting spots coming into this year. They got, fresh starts to some extent and are now free agents. Jonathan Drouin is a guy whose career kind of seemed on the ropes. He goes back to Colorado, links up with his boy Nathan MacKinnon, has an awesome season. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, bought out by the Vancouver Canucks, goes to Florida early in the season, was logging huge minutes for them as they dealt with the rash of injuries they had on the blue line. Jason Zucker didn't sign a new contract this year, but he was casted away to Arizona, sent to Nashville for close to nothing at the deadline. He ended up having a somewhat respectable stretch drive with the Predators. And then, of course, Matt Duchene still playing for the Dallas Stars. He had an awesome season as well. 25 goals, was massive on that third line with Tyler Seguin. When you look at this list, Frank, is there one of them, and maybe Drouin, Ekman-Larsson, and Duchene are the better options for this, but is there one of them you could see leaving their current situations where they got this career rejuvenation, or do you think all of them are kind of destined to stay where they are and they're going to, not bleep with happy?
Well, I think that's certainly the case with Drouin. Like, it's not a guarantee that he stays, but just listening to Chris MacFarlane and his optimism to get something done, they recognize the fit that he's been. If you listen to Jared Bednar all season long, he's been advocating for Jonathan Drouin, and the season that he's had, said, I did not know that he was this complete of a player. So I'd imagine that they find a way to work something out. I would say, for Matt Duchene, if he has the option, if money really isn't the motivating factor to find that fit and stay there, maybe the one guy that I have real question marks about would be Ekman-Larsson, just because they would desperately want him to stay, I would think, with the impact that he's made on their defense core, but they've got so many other pieces to sign. What's Reinhart going to cost? Can you find a way to keep Brendan Montour? Is he another guy that's potentially lost some money this season with his play? They've got a whole list of guys that they need to keep. And I would say that when you look at Ekman-Larsson, maybe he's played back up to a level, not at the $7+ million that he was at, but certainly a healthy raise from where he is now, that it would make sense.
What a banging start to the show, Frank. We broke down a Western Conference Final double OT thriller. We got breaking news about Don Waddell. Let's keep this thing going and get into the coach's room with Jon Goyens. Jon Goyens joining us with the coach's room, as he does twice a week for these playoffs. And let's sink our teeth into yesterday's Western Conference Final. We're looking at it from a bit of a bigger picture perspective, and one area that you wanted to focus in on was Edmonton, their ability to defend really consistently during these playoffs, but they're going up against a team in Dallas who likes to fly the zone, likes to create odd mans. What are some areas that Edmonton needs to be aware of when trying to defend Dallas in this area of the game?
Well, we all know that Edmonton has improved defensively. Craig Button is one guy that talked about it a ton during these playoffs, and there's some other real experts out there that have concluded the same thing. I guess we could give credit to Frank as well. But the reality is that doesn't happen by accident, right? It's been a work in progress. They've improved a ton. You see their PK now being number one in the playoffs. But in reality, at 5-on-5, they do have certain lapses at times, because when they go on the rush, when they're in the ozone, it's like all or nothing. And they're not necessarily the best team at reloading, for example. They do have a hint of hope that pucks can keep in or bounce over a guy's stick. And then a team like Dallas will take advantage of that. So when we go to the clips here, the first clips, what we're going to see is the two teams playing against each other during the regular season. So Draisaitl overhandles, creates odd man rush. Dallas is elite at making you pay for turning pucks over. Watch where McLeod goes here. This is a real mental lapse. 4 guys. He could have cut the ice in half. He doesn't. He drifts. Bad line change. Bang. 3-on-1. And Dallas was doing this to Vegas. Dallas was doing this to Colorado. If you have a brain fart, if you pinch when you shouldn't pinch, they are going to make you pay. And this is a play that becomes a 4-on-1 because it's at the end of a PK. They're good at killing the rush. We've talked about it with Tanev, Heiskanen, Lindell, their D group, and how quickly now, if again, bad pinch or a hope play, boom, they go the other way and they create that 2-on-1, and it's in the back of the net. So we pause here. Now we see how Dallas has continued that trend throughout the playoffs. And there's very, very similar plays. And we'll let this roll. Watch Stankoven. He comes in late. Quick hands of an offensive player can create quick turnovers. And you look at Robertson. He reloaded. He found time and space, out of sight, out of mind, because you can be fast or you could be on time. They're two different things. Kill the rush, bump it, bad pinch by Theodore on the outside, and watch how quickly Dadonov bolts to the net. And we talked about flying the zone. Look at Jamie Benn. He supports. He realizes we're going rim. Watch him read the play. Watch Vegas. 5 guys almost outside dots. Boom. Breakaway. It is flying the zone in such a way that it's not really cheating. Watch again Dadonov. He's not cheating. He sees Heiskanen blocks. He's gone. And he can protect the puck off the rush. And the guy who blocks it is the guy who puts it into the back of the net. And when in doubt, what we saw last night, if you turn over the puck, they're going to make you pay. You have to take care of that biscuit way better and way more consistently.
Hey, I always take care of the biscuit. I love and cherish the biscuit. I like butter on it. I like honey. I like chicken with cheese and bacon. It's such a delectable choice on the menu at Chick-fil-A. But let's talk about the Dallas penalty kill. Didn't really have to work too hard in game 1 because they were only penalized once, a too many men on the ice penalty. But their PK was just okay, 8th in the regular season. They're currently 69%, 11th during these playoffs, and are, as we know, facing a historic power play in the Oilers. What must they do to alleviate the effectiveness of Edmonton's power play? What would you do as a power play expert in terms of trying to stop Edmonton's power play?
Well, first of all, you can never go hunting outside dots unless it is a 50-50 puck. A player has his numbers turned and facing the inside. When in doubt, you have to mitigate by keeping everything to the outside and don't allow, and I think it'll become a drinking game the amount of times I say mitigate throughout all these breakdowns. But the other part is you cannot allow Edmonton, you can't allow them to create a lot of depth in the zone by your first forward on the PK getting drawn too high. The moment he gets suckered and drawn towards Bouchard, then you have a real disconnect in your diamond. So as we roll these clips, and actually just before we roll it, Gavin, the Edmonton Oilers only scored once against Dallas this year. They were 1 for 12, and the only goal came at 4-on-3 overtime winner. So Dallas this year has done a really good job, but they've got to make sure that they are more consistent because there are some parallels between, especially what Colorado did and what Edmonton wants to do. So let's let these clips roll. Obviously, elite player in Makar. We were talking about Drouin. He climbs across the top of that diamond, which is no longer a diamond, and you're giving that Draisaitl space to walk in or take a 1T. Bouchard climbs, drags. McDavid climbs. It gives that Draisaitl goal line space. Again, you go up top, you stay tight, but if you give that down low pass, your goalie Ottinger's got to be aware. Here's that 2-on-1 creativity. You've got to be aware. You can't allow teams to just walk right through, but you see how Ottinger is way more aware last night. They bring it up. They try to look at the diamond. That F1 is much, much tighter. And Ottinger is not falling asleep on that play. Like, these are almost the same plays, little cycles. Now, if Dallas gets caught outside dots, you give elite shooters like Makar, like Bouchard, and they don't have flanks to give it to, they're going to rip pucks. They're going to absolutely rip pucks. And we're going to see a Bouchard goal right here. They climb, they give them way too much space, and they're going to smoke that puck. So what does Dallas do? This is from last night. Now they're a little bit tighter. Now, this is where Edmonton's going to have to create 2-on-1s that are on the fringe of that dot line and give it to McDavid earlier, and maybe he could get pucks in on the short side. And when in doubt on the rush, let McDavid take this space, but you got to be weary of letting that shot through, because if anyone can score from range, it's Connor McDavid. And that was the only goal that Edmonton scored this year against Dallas. So tighter diamond, don't get drawn out of the slot too much, because if not, Bouchard can bring the hammer right down the pipe.
So, I mean, the power play, obviously Edmonton only had the one attempt in game one, but outside of that, whether it's the defense off the rush, what team do you think did a better job of sticking to their system in game one?
You know what, especially the way Edmonton finished out their last series, there's the part that's been really impressive, because it always comes back to this quality of shots versus quantity of shots. At the end of the day, what they were doing to Vancouver and frustrating them and keeping them to the outside and bringing down those shots, if you're going to hold Dallas in regulation to under 30 shots, if you're going to hold them, I believe, under 27 shots a game, and you're going to reduce the opportunities from the slot, I really like what Edmonton did in terms of that, where a lot of people would be focused on the offense.
Interesting stuff. It's going to be a fascinating series both here and out between the Rangers and Panthers, and we'll have more breakdowns with you next week. The Coaches Room with Jon Goyens. Have a good weekend, Jon.
Have a good one, guys.
Moving along to our daily Faceoff inbox question, hashtag AskDFO. The worst part about being on the road is that I'm not sleeping on my Douglas. You can get one today. Head to douglas.ca/DFO to place your order. Handcrafted in Canada, ensuring the highest quality materials and fastest delivery to you. Douglas.ca/DFO. Frank, let's talk a little bit about the Eastern Conference Final that's coming up. I see a lot of people asking this question, and it confuses me why it's even such a big question. Should the Rangers put Rempe in the lineup tonight?
So I love the Rempe conversation because I love what he's brought. I think he's been an emotional force. I think he's been a physical force for them. Every time he's been in the lineup, he's brought it. But the problem for me comes in, who do you take out to put him in? We talked about this yesterday with Colby. Like I want to get him in there, but there's not anyone that I would favor Rempe over to take him out. That's the tough part.
For me, I chuckle because, again, yes, the emotional side of it, the physicality, everything he brings. He hasn't played double digits in shifts in like 5 or 6 games now. Like, I mean, he barely plays. To me, if you're a Rangers fan, you're sitting there going, we're losing because Rempe's not in the lineup. I think there are bigger problems to focus on if you end up going down 2-0, but I don't think they will. And that brings me to our daily bets for Bet365. You can sign up today and use the promo code DAILY365 to get in on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank, I got a little same gamer cooked up today for this one, and it is juicy. Chris Kreider, anytime goal scorer, Rangers to win, and to juice it up, you throw in a Panthers prop, Carter Verhaeghe. I love his shot prop. He got 5 in game 1 of this series. I like him to hit it again. Also, you get that little early payout with Bet365. If the team goes up by 3, the money line hits no matter what. What do you think of a Rangers bounce back tonight, Frank?
Oh, I'm all for it. I think game 1 was the worst game the Rangers are going to play in this series, and I think that's a very likely outcome.
Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time, brought to you by Wendy's. Wendy's only uses fresh, never frozen Canadian beef in all of their burgers. Whether it's a JBC, a Dave Single, or a Baconator, you can guarantee that beef has never seen the inside of a freezer. Download the Wendy's app today to check out the latest deals. Frank, Nikita Zadorov, let's go back to Canucks locker room cleanout. He's always good for a quote. He had this to say yesterday.
A little bit about just how the fan base kind of embraced you, what you and maybe your family saw, and where it does it compare to anything that you've experienced in the past?
Well, like I said, hockey in Canada is different. I can compare it to Calgary, but I feel like Vancouver fan base is way bigger. Calgary is not even the number 1 team in Alberta, so it's kind of like, well, I mean, it's obvious. Like, there's more Edmonton fans because they have a bigger history through the years, right? But Vancouver is a different level. You know, the fans were so hungry to see the playoff hockey at home. You know, it's been 8 years, and there's so many great traditions. Obviously, like, this organization had not won the Stanley Cup before. That makes it even probably putting more pressure on you as well. But
Frank, the line that stands out there, he loves stirring the pot, but calling out Flames fans saying not even the biggest market in Alberta. It's true,
Facts.
but yeah. But still, I mean, saying it out loud after you were a Flame this year, I don't know. Classic Zadorov.
Well, think about it from his perspective. He was so problematic there, partially because of his mouth, that they needed to move him in November. And that's why he ended up moving on. So I guess if you don't like the way the Flames handled the situation, that's what you end up saying. So he casts a little shade. Good on him. He also was giving it to Edmonton and Oilers fans to start the series, saying that there's nothing else to do there. All for the good clips. Buyer beware when it comes to the free agent market. Anyone paying him over $5 million a year in AAV is going to be really disappointed.
Yeah, I remember, Frank, to do a little story time. The first big media event I got to do with you was that player media tour out in Chicago, like 3-4 years ago, whenever it was. And it was right around that time Zadorov had that interview about what a freak Nathan MacKinnon was, right, in his diet and all that. And I remember we asked MacKinnon about it. And before even getting into his question or into his answer, the instant reaction is he shook his head and said, "Man, Z is such a donkey." And that line, whenever I see Zadorov speaking out, I just can't stop thinking of MacKinnon just going, "Man, Z is such a donkey."
Yeah. I mean, think of the places he's played to this point: Buffalo, Chicago, Colorado, Calgary, now Vancouver. It's a lot of places for a guy that's in demand.
Yeah. Just a reminder, if you want to get in on some action tonight for the ECF, we got the playoff parlay challenge up at dailyfaceoff.com. Head to the site, hit the DFO games tab, and you could be winning gift cards or even a jersey of your favorite team. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Enjoy the weekend, Frank, and we'll be back on Monday to continue the playoff talk.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.